Skylar Neese was born on February 10, 1996 to Mary, who worked as an administrative assistant in a cardiac lab, and David, who worked as a product assembler at Walmart. Growing up, Skylar attended primary school in Cheat Lake, West Virginia. When Skylar was in the second grade, when they were both 7 years old, she met Shelia Eddy, and the two spent time together at their local community center, the Shack. Shelia Eddy was the only child of Tara and Greg Eddy, and was born on September 29, 1995. Sheila's father was partially disabled from a car injury and was unable to work. The couple divorced in the year 2000. Sheila's mother, Tara, remarried to James Clendenen, and the family moved from Stonepath Townhouses in Cheat Lake to Star City, where Sheila started freshman year with Skylar at University High School. Sheila was stated to be overjoyed to finally be at the same school as Skylar, as she requested to be placed on the same class schedule as her friend. Skylar did well in school and was an honor student who desired to be a criminal lawyer one day. Whilst at high school, Sheila and Skylar met Rachel Shove, an aspiring singer and actress who had recently left St. Francis, and was the only child of Rusty and Patricia Shove. Rachel grew raised in a single-parent home in Morgantown and was described as a devout Catholic, having attended St. Francis Catholic School previously and came from a rich family. Rachel, along with a few other classmates, was an enthusiastic participant in Young Life Activities, an evangelical Christian organization. At first, the three were inseparable. They went on long trips in Sheila's car, shared photographs on social media, hung out at each other's houses, and would describe themselves as the Three Musketeers. Drinking, smoking marijuana, and sneaking out at night to cross the Pennsylvania border to Star City. Sheila was described as a terrible influence on the trio by parents, friends, and classmates alike, with Mary Neese later describing Sheila as always stupid and doing crazy stuff, and Skylar's cousin Kyle referring to Sheila as a bad seed. Despite this, Skylar maintained her friendship with Sheila. Rachel's motivations for staying with Sheila are less evident than Skylar's. Rachel came from a well-to-do family, was well-liked and talented. Despite the fact that Sheila was depicted as the villain, it wasn't until Rachel entered the picture that the group dynamics and allegiance transformed. However, as previously said, the three got along swimmingly at first, until sophomore year that is. Skylar and Sheila began to have a rift, and it appeared that Sheila and Rachel had grown an edgier side. They started experimenting with booze and drugs, and they began leaving Skylar out of their activities. Skylar became a third wheel to Rachel and Sheila as the dynamics of their friendship changed over time. Skylar and Sheila went to Rachel's house for a sleepover on August 16, 2011, late into their summer vacation. The trio began drinking after Patricia Shove went to sleep. After a few vodkas, the trio quickly began snapping photos, with some of them kissing, leading in Rachel and Sheila having sex. Following that, the three got into a heated dispute. Patricia came downstairs to break up the fight when Rachel's mother awoke to the ruckus, forcing Rachel to retire to her room alone. Patricia had to return later that night because Skylar and Sheila had continued to fight. Skylar tweets shortly after that night on August 21, 2011, that she had discovered a new secret. The three were continuously fighting in the months preceding up to the murder, as Skylar began to indicate in a series of tweets that she was intending to expose Sheila and Rachel's connection. Skylar tweeted to Sheila on August 28th saying, "Yet another reason to fucking hate you. People who start shit for no reason at all, #pathetic. And, even bigger whore than I thought, #not surprising. I'd tell the whole school all the shit I have on everyone, which is a lot." This tweet is said to be directed towards Sheila and Rachel over the events of the sleepover. Skylar, Rachel, and Sheila had created a noticeable rift when they returned to school in September 2022. Sheila and Rachel grew closer, and Skylar was left out of most of their plans. Skylar was becoming increasingly isolated as the two dressed alike and talked openly about their weekend together. Outsiders subsequently described the group's relationship as Rachel and Sheila's greatest pals, with Skylar as a tag-along. A tag-along who knew a lot of the girls' secrets and told everyone about it. In October of 2011, during a science lesson at school, the two were overheard asking their teacher, Mr. Dimchak, how to dispose of a body in acid. Tensions were high by spring 2012, with Skylar allegedly about Sheila tweeting on May 31st, "You're a two-faced bitch and clearly fucking stupid if you thought I wouldn't have found out." Post, "Too bad my buddies are having lives without me." Another tweet from that spring remarked, Daniel Haviter, a classmate, afterwards spoke of the two. "Sheila and Skylar were often fighting," said Daniel, a UHS classmate. One time sophomore year, Rachel and I were at Pride and Prejudice practice, and Rachel put her phone up to her ear, laughing. "Listen to this," she said. Skylar didn't realize Sheila had put her on three-way calling, and Rachel was listening in when Sheila and Skylar were fighting. Skylar left on her annual family vacation to Myrtle Beach with Sheila and her family on June 1st, 2012. Skylar and Sheila fought the entire time they were on vacation, and their disagreements were still unresolved a week later when they came home. Rachel went to a Young Life camp while Skylar and Sheila were away and returned home on June 9th, just 2 days after the girls. "Skylar has to die now," Sheila said to Rachel when they got home. Sheila and Rachel started working on their plan the next day, researching ways to kill someone, and soon opting to use a knife because neither of them had access to or experience with guns. They looked into the best ways to dispose of a body, debating whether to dissolve it in acid, bury it, or, more terrifyingly, give it to pigs. During this time, Rachel was said to have told a student that she didn't mind if Skylar died, but the classmate didn't report the exchange because she assumed it was simply another remark made as a result of a heated argument. Skylar was moping about the home on one of the hottest days of the year in Star City, July 4th, 2012, moaning because her so-called pals had chosen to hang out without her. Skylar took to social media to express her dissatisfaction at not being included in their plans, writing, "Sick of sitting at effing home. Thanks, friends. Enjoy hanging out with you all too. I asked, Skylar, why don't you read a book?" Mary Neese later remembered, attempting to persuade her daughter to quit wallowing. Later that day, Skylar sent out a tweet, her last 2 tweets, which she sent before leaving Wendy's on July 5th, further added to the speculation. "You doing crap like that is why I will never really trust you." She then retweeted, "All I do is hope." Skylar was working the late shift at her local Wendy's on July 5th, a part-time job she was juggling with her academics. The teen arrived home shortly after 10 p.m. and spent some time downstairs with her parents before retiring to her room. Skylar had no idea that her friends had set their trap and were on their way to catch her. Sheila and Rachel had gathered a sort of DIY murder kit, including wipes, bleach, a shovel, and paper towels hidden in the boot. Soon after Skylar's shift at Wendy's ended, Sheila and Rachel began messaging and calling her, urging her to join them on a drive and smoke. Because of their recent and long-standing troubles as a trio, Skylar was originally hesitant and refused to go. Skylar's last tweet, "You doing crap like that is why I will never truly trust you," was sent at 10:48 p.m. and was widely considered to be about the couple. It didn't seem to take long to persuade Skylar to hang out with them, as Sheila's silver Toyota turned up at 12:31 a.m. Less than 2 hours after the tweet, Skylar, dressed in a tie-dye blouse and green shorts, snatched her purse and bong and slipped into the back seat of Sheila's car, like she had done so many times before. A short while later, they arrived. They arrived after having to detour owing to a marked police cruiser on their customary route on Pennsylvania's Eddy Run Road, which is named after Sheila's father's family, who live in a trailer nearby. The girls had been here often to smoke weed and hang out in Sheila's car. The 3 talked for a while in Sheila's car before deciding to go out and smoke some weed. The girls quickly realized Sheila's lighter didn't work, or perhaps it was supposed to be this way, and Skylar turned around to go to her car and grab hers. Rachel and Sheila knew it was time as she started walking away. The 2 activated their pre-programmed signal, counted to 3, and began stabbing Skylar with knives hidden under their bodies. Skylar tried to flee, fearing for her life, but was swiftly tackled by Rachel, who continued the ordeal. Skylar put up a valiant fight against her companions, grabbing the knife and cutting Rachel's ankle, leaving a 3-inch wound. Rachel is said to have ceased her attack at this point, but Sheila continued. Skylar's neck was making noises during the attack, according to Rachel, and Sheila didn't stop until the noise stopped. Skylar was able to keep repeating the same word over and over. Why? Sheila and Rachel returned to the car to begin cleaning up when they were sure Skylar was dead. They retrieved the shovel from the Toyota's trunk, intending to bury her in a nearby creek. They attempted to dig after dragging Skylar's body. They quickly realized it was too stony and covered her with earth, leaves, and branches instead. They did everything they could to conceal their actions. The 2 removed their blood-stained clothing and discarded it, as well as the knives. Skylar had left her purse in the car, but had left her phone on, which she had turned off and threw out with her body and handbag. Sheila retweeted, "Always keep your cool," after the 2 arrived home shortly after morning. It took 3 hours from the time they picked up Skylar to the time they departed the site. Skylar's body would not be discovered for another 6 months. For the Neese family, The next day began as usual. Her parents had gone to work without speaking to her, figuring she was still sleeping. Skylar needed to borrow her father's car to drive to work later that day, so he arrived home around lunchtime. Skylar's room was locked from the inside, with the seat outside her open bedroom window, he saw. Quickly, he realized she had gone away again the night before and had not yet returned home. Skylar's father contacted Sheila to check whether she had heard from Skylar since yesterday evening. She told him she had called Skylar the night before, but hadn't seen her. Panic rose when the shift manager at Wendy's contacted the home to inquire if Skylar was going to be coming into work that day. They immediately saw that this was out of character and that something was amiss. They began calling her friends, family, and the police to inquire about Skylar's whereabouts. Sheila called the family again at this time. Skylar had been with her and Rachel Schoaf this time, she revealed. Skylar was worried about getting in trouble for sneaking out, so they picked her up shortly after 11 p.m. and drove around with her for about an hour before dumping her down at the end of the street at midnight. Skylar was seen freely getting into a car shortly after 12:30 a.m. on CCTV footage from the apartment building. They initially misidentified the car since they couldn't read the number plate on the clip. Skylar's disappearance was attributed to her being a runaway, owing to her propensity of slipping out, and an Amber Alert was not issued since the adolescent did not meet the criteria. Her parents were aware that she had not gone away because she had left all of her personal belongings, including her contact lens solution, phone charger, and even her dog. Skylar had also placed a bench outside her bedroom window so she could easily slip back in later, according to the Neeses. Skylar's father made a television plea for her safe return a few days after she went missing. A vigil was also conducted, which was attended by Rachel and Sheila, the killers who were keeping up appearances. On July 9th, authorities began to take Skylar's disappearance more seriously, realizing that this was not a typical runaway case after digging into her background. The search was aided by the West Virginia State Police and the FBI. Sheila was interviewed by Morgan Spurlock, an FBI agent, and Star City Jessica Colbank, a Star City police officer, as soon as Skylar was reported missing. Sheila was contacted by the two investigators who inquired about Skylar's absence. Jessica Colbank interrogated her about Skylar's tweets and demanded to see Sheila's vehicle. They assumed the automobile in the CCTV was Sheila's Toyota right away, but Sheila was unfazed by the interrogation. Colbank questioned Sheila about why she had not done more to publicize her missing friend on social media, and walked away from the encounter convinced that Sheila was a textbook narcissist. Rachel was approached by the detectives and consented to speak with them over the phone as she was still at camp. She was vague and kept pointing the police to Sheila because she would know more. She tried to remove herself from Skylar by directing the police to Sheila. They asked Rachel to come to the police station once she returned home, which she agreed to but did not follow through with. The detectives saw that Sheila and Rachel's stories were almost identical, as if they were planned. Rachel's mother, according to the police, did not seem to comprehend the gravity of the situation. For months after Skylar's murder, Sheila continued to publish tweets and Facebook statuses pleading with her friend to return home. "Me and Rachel miss you so much, especially at lunch, when we sit at lunch tables alone," she wrote on October 2nd. "Return so we don't appear to be loners any longer. LOL, school is difficult without you. In fact, everything is difficult without you. I genuinely miss chatting to you on the phone at all hours of the day and night. I know you don't agree with some of the recent comments, so please come home and prove them all wrong. I've been doing everything I can to assist you, and I know you'd appreciate it. I'm not sure why you haven't returned home yet, but if you're afraid that people will be angry with you, they won't. All we want is for you to go home safely." Rumors swirled around University High School, always circling Sheila and Rachel. They weren't just accused at school, they were also accused online. Two anonymous Twitter profiles were set up to follow Rachel and Sheila and send them messages, one of which said, Luke 12:2. "Nothing is hidden that will not be known, and nothing is covered up that will not be revealed." And being pretty little liars down together. "What you going to do? What you going to do when they come for you?" And hashtag, "promise to never leave you cold." Daniel Hoveter, one of Skylar's closest friends, saw right through the girls' falsehoods, accusing them of murder. Normally, Rachel would ignore the adolescent, but in October, she finally snapped. Rachel ran out of the classroom crying during a violent confrontation between the two, and their teacher warned Daniel about false allegations. Police had gotten very close to the truth by December. They were eventually able to recognize Sheila's car in the surveillance footage, and they were able to see that they did drive to Blacksville, which Sheila and Rachel had always denied. until Rachel went completely off script and told them a brand new story about what happened that night. The two story had been verbatim up until this point. Skylar had been with them, but had run away into the woods, Rachel told detectives. Rachel recounted how she attempted to track down her buddy, but that she had vanished and that she had not been seen since. Detectives were stunned. This was radically different to what they had been taught for weeks. The two were subjected to a polygraph test by the police in December. Sheila was a two-time failure. Rachel did everything she could to avoid taking the test, including jumping out of her father's car and running to Sheila's mother's office, which was about a mile away, to hide. During this time, the families had been cautioned by the police to keep Sheila and Rachel away from each other, so that they wouldn't be able to make up fresh stories or alibis together. Tara arrived at the station later that day to get Sheila's phone and laptop, and everything came to a head. She told investigator Colbank that Rachel was in her car with Sheila while she was there. "These girls know exactly where Skylar is," Coleman charged, accusing Tara of knowing what had happened to Skylar. "You are a fool if you have not realized that by now. After all the evidence you know we have, you must believe it, and open your eyes because those girls did something to her and know exactly where she is. She is dead, wherever she is, and they are aware of her whereabouts. For the sake of Dave and Mary's family, you must put an end to this." Colbank was removed from the case as a result of her outburst. Rachel was coming home with her mother on December 28, 2012, after spending Christmas with her family. Patricia saw her daughter's behavior increasing tight as she drove closer to town. The FBI was scheduled to question Rachel the next day. She went into a rage when she got home. A 911 call was received in Monongalia County. "I have a problem with my 16-year-old daughter. I can't keep her under my control any longer. She's striking us, she's yelling, she's rushing through the neighborhood. Hand over the phone to me. No, this is the final chapter. It's over. My spouse is attempting to restrain her. Please make haste." Rachel was admitted to a mental health hospital not long after. Rachel asked to be escorted to the authorities the day she was discharged from the hospital, January 3rd. Rachel and her parents rushed straight from the hospital to her lawyer's office, where she informed the U.S. Attorney's Office that Rachel was willing to talk if a settlement could be reached. "We were anticipating her to respond. Yes, Skylar overdosed on heroin," said Corporal Gaskins, the primary investigator. The first 3 words out of her mouth were, "We stabbed her." They requested her to start over from the beginning. He and his crew were astonished. Rachel drew over a waste paper pail in case she puked, and then proceeded to finally tell the truth about what had occurred to her buddy Skylar. "We just didn't like her anymore," Rachel stated when asked why. Rachel agreed to drive the detectives to Skylar's location. Rachel, her attorney, and detectives drove into Pennsylvania in 2 automobiles. Due to the snow, officers had to wait until it thawed before retrieving Skylar's body. They put Rachel's room under electronic surveillance and had her set up a meeting with Sheila because they knew she was eager to meet her friend. Rachel was unable to elicit anything incriminating from Sheila on that particular occasion. Sheila later tweeted a photo of herself and Rachel, writing, "Finally got to see, @Rach, heart." Rachel was wearing a wire in this photo. She agreed to try to get Sheila to incriminate herself as part of her agreement, knowing that she would be keen to learn whether and what Rachel had told anyone during her stay in the hospital. Unfortunately, no such proof was found. Sheila, on the other hand, was suspicious, tweeting the next day, "First time I've ever been speechless. Holy fuck." Days after the unsuccessful wire trap, a series of tweets allegedly directed towards Rachel were sent. Fortunately, Sheila's incrimination was no longer required by the cops. The snow had melted by January 16, 2013, and Skylar's body was finally discovered with the help of a huge team of cops, FBI agents, and cadaver dogs. Her body had degraded to the point where her head was no longer attached, so her remains had been sent for DNA testing to be sure. The cops, like the killers, were certain. They were forewarned of what was to come. By March 13, 2013, the authorities had confirmed what everyone had suspected. The remains were those of Skylar's. Skylar had been stabbed over 50 times according to the autopsy. Despite Rachel's confession and the presence of a body, detectives have opted not to charge her just yet. Rachel would agree to plead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder in exchange for her cooperation and testimony against Sheila. In April, Rachel was even allowed to go on vacation with her mother. As part of her plea agreement, she was sentenced on May 1, 2013. Rachel surrendered herself and pled guilty to a second-degree murder in court on May 1st, as promised. Rachel was transported to the Northern Regional Juvenile Detention Center in Wheeling. while awaiting punishment. She was later sentenced to 30 years in prison with a 10-year prospect of release. Rachel cried the entire time, apologizing to the Neese family for her actions. Sheila was completely unaware that Rachel was pleading guilty. Sheila was at the Cracker Barrel diner with her mother as all of this was going on. Investigators stationed guards surrounding the restaurant to block them from leaving after Tara promised authorities they would come back for more questions after they had finished eating. Police apprehended the duo in the parking lot, and Sheila was eventually arrested for Skylar Neese's murder. After then, there was a long period of silence. Sheila could not be formally identified because she was a minor, but she was well known online. Shelia Eddy was granted adult status on September 4, 2013. This meant that the media would be able to publicize her name. Her trial was originally scheduled for October 22nd, but was later rescheduled. Skylar's family was enraged by Sheila's behavior in court, with her father saying that Sheila smiled and seemed to enjoy the spotlight. The public was able to see Sheila's pretrial proceedings live on the internet. Sheila pled guilty in an unexpected shift in strategy, clinging to her attorney, Michael Benninger. He informed the court that he couldn't defend his client's behavior or come up with a viable defense to counter Rachel Shove's predicted testimony, because he couldn't come up with one. Sheila didn't know where else to go. Her pretrial was rapidly changing into sentencing, with the prosecution agreeing to a sentence of 15 years to life in prison, with the prospect of parole in 15 years in exchange for her guilty plea. Both are being held in Laking Correctional Center, which is around 150 miles southwest of Morgantown.